The MLB Draft is just days away. So are the current Tigers staying or going? We've got thoughts. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. We are just days away now from the two-day Major League Baseball draft. And as promised, we will have an episode coming where we go player by player in LSU's high school signing class and the likelihood, probability of those players signing or showing up on campus. That's coming. But today, we're going to focus on the current Tigers, the players who are expected to hear their name called over the two-day MLB draft, who is likely to sign, who is likely to return, and who's going to have very interesting decisions to make. So we'll do that here in today's episode. And we'll wrap up by projecting the 2026 lineup for the LSU baseball Tigers. Again, we'll get to that. So let's start with kind of what we know, and then we'll get into the big questions in the second segment. Here's what we know. Kade Anderson is going to be the first pick of the draft. Every single mock draft that's out there right now has Kade Anderson number 1 overall to the Washington Nationals. When you start to see consensus like that, it's a really good indicator among people in the know of what Washington is planning to do. And really the decision is among two players. It's Kade Anderson of LSU and it's Liam Doyle from Tennessee. And when I've asked scouts specifically, why is Anderson surpassed Doyle as the top left-handed college pitcher, there's a couple of reasons. Primarily, number one, because both are power arm lefties with high strikeout stuff. Primarily, Anderson is a better strike thrower than Doyle. That's predominantly number one. Number two is the upside. When you look at Kade Anderson with his big, long frame, he can still add muscle and size. So the thought is there's still opportunity to add more power behind that arm. Where Anderson right now is topping out at 97, 98, he can go higher as he continues to develop physically. Remember, he's a draft-eligible sophomore, so he's only in his second year of college. I mean, that's a guy who, under normal circumstances, would have another year even still at LSU. Think about what that would look like. Another year of Kade Anderson. Just think the development from year one at LSU, where his ERA in the SEC was 27, to year two, where he became the number 1 pick in the draft and the best pitcher in the country. Think about what another year would look like. Well, that year is going to happen in a farm system. And so that's why teams are projecting Kade Anderson with a higher ceiling than Liam Doyle. Well, he's going to be number 1 overall. By the best info that I have about Anthony Eyanson, he's projected to be a compensatory round pick or an early second round pick. Expect somewhere in the 30s or the early 40s for Anthony Eyanson. And when you look at the MLB draft slot values for this 2025 draft, remember, every pick has an associated slot value for it. Like Kade Anderson, for example, goes number 1 overall. The slot value for the Nationals there is $11 million. That would be Kade Anderson's signing bonus. Let's say Anthony Eyanson goes hypothetically in the competitive balance round A 33 overall to Boston. That's $2.8 million. If he goes 38 to the Mets, that's $2.5 million. Just as a for instance, if he goes 40th to the Dodgers, that's $2.4 million. So just as an example, an illustration of what he would likely be garnering, Anthony Eyanson is going to make a couple $1,000,000 in his signing bonus, which is a tremendous return on the investment of spending a year in Baton Rouge, going from UC San Diego to Baton Rouge, pitching in the SEC, playing the way he did, wins a national championship, forever has, is forever iconic at LSU for being one of the co-aces on a national championship team, finishing 3rd in the country in strikeouts. And he's going to go make about $2.5 million in the signing bonus in this upcoming draft, which is awesome. So Anderson, we know, Eyanson, they're both going to be gone. Among the position players, like Jared Jones, this is obviously his leverage year. He's going to go. The conversations I've had with scouts that have him projected somewhere in the third or fourth round, and I know there's always this question about Jared Jones. People may look and go, but he hit great power bat in college. But you got to remember, he is a right-handed first base DH, and those are a dime a dozen. So because he's not projecting at a higher value position or shown the ability maybe to hit for average consistently, he's going to be knocked down a bit. So let's say hypothetically he goes back end of round 3. You'd be looking at, let's just say hypothetically, the Dodgers have the last pick in round 3. That would be $737K. So that's about what you're looking for, probably. $750,000 is probably what Jared Jones is looking at. Daniel Dickinson, similar. He is projected, as I'm told, between a second and third round pick. So if you look somewhere end of round 2, beginning of round 3, you're looking somewhere in the $1 to $1.5 million range. For Daniel Dickinson, depending on where he goes and what ultimately he agrees to. But with those types of numbers, you just understand these guys aren't going to give up their leverage by coming back to school because they're not going to be able to make that much money in NIL or revenue share next year at LSU. So you've won a championship, you have your leverage, you get your big signing bonus, you start your professional career, and you hope that being in college like you have fast tracks you on a path to the majors with whatever team drafts you. And so you're not riding buses for 3 or 4 years. You're closer to Major League Baseball. So Anderson, Eyanson, Jones, Dickinson, those guys are the ones we know that are going to be drafted. They're going to sign their pro contracts. Now, there's a list of other guys who are very likely to be drafted and sign their pro contracts as well. But those aren't necessarily the guys that I want to focus on. The guys I want to focus on are guys that really are going to have a decision to make that could alter the roster for LSU in 2026 and how Jay Johnson's trying to piece this thing together. So we'll get to that as we continue, and we're glad you're with us here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch. You can even invite a bigger group to come with you. And Gametime makes that possible. You see, Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Write this down. July 28th, my radio show will be in Houston, Texas at the Rustic before the Astros play Dylan Cruz and the Nationals. So if you want to be there on July 28th with us, get your tickets at Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So we've talked about the guys that we know are going to be drafted and signed. Anderson, Eyanson, Jones, Dickinson, those. For example, you look at Jacob Myers. Jacob Myers spends a year at LSU. He's got big-time stuff, as we've seen. If he ever learns command to cut down the walks, he is a big leaguer all day, every day. The over-the-top release point, the fastball topping out at 98, 99, multi-pitch mix. He is a big league reliever who could have a long career if he ever commands his stuff. Myers, as I'm told, projects as a 4th or 5th round guy. I think Zach Cowan is an interesting one that probably returns. Now, Cowan, as I was told, is a round 8 to 14 type prospect. Does a team take a flyer on him? The dollar amount that I had one scout give me for Zach Cowan was $150K. That's what they'd be willing to do for Zach Cowan. Cowan's not a starter at the next level. Remember, really with a fastball changeup mix, a 2-pitch mix, it's very difficult for him to get through a lineup multiple times because when teams have seen him, we saw this manifest this year for Zach Cowan. I mean, he was fantastic in Omaha, but throughout the course of the season, very good as a reliever, struggled at times to extend well against SEC hitters. So if you're Zach Cowan, do you sign for $150K and go try to take a stab at being a pro? Do you come back to LSU and maybe try to be a starter for LSU next season? Or worst case scenario, maybe you're the closer next year with a guy like Kade Anderson moving into the rotation. He'll have a decision to make. I do think Zach Cowan probably ends up back at LSU, but I don't say it with a ton of confidence. The guy who has the biggest decision to make is Chase Shores. And I know what you're probably thinking with Chase Shores. You're looking and going, Matt, Chase Shores is 6'8". He throws 101 miles an hour. He was awesome in the postseason. Scouts are going to salivate over him. They're going to pay him a couple of $1 million, and he's going to sign. And you're probably right. You're probably right. That's probably what will happen. If I had to take my entire net worth, take it to a ticket window in Vegas, put it on red or black, either is Chase Shores coming back or is he signing? My bet is he's going to sign a pro contract. He's a guy that came to LSU as one of the top right-handed arms in the country. He had Tommy John through his freshman season. Because of when it happened, it cost him the entire next season. This year, his 3rd year in college, was a real struggle for him for a bulk of the season as he went 18 months without facing live hitting to get back into a rhythm on the mound. It was when they moved him out of the rotation, remember, midway through SEC play, specifically as a bullpen arm. He went exclusively to the stretch. Ben McDonald has explained this very well for us in the past. Ben McDonald himself is a 6'7" pitcher. It's awkward for these tall guys to unwind their body with a consistent repetitive motion, so command can be an issue. It just takes time to figure that out. Shores hadn't pitched competitively in 18 months. So what they did, they put him in the bullpen. He went exclusively to the stretch, and it simplified his motion. You saw much better command with fastball, with that slider with a 20-inch vertical break, meaning as his release points up from the right side, it looks like it's coming at the hitter, breaks clear across the plate into the left-handed batter's box. I mean, he is an incredible talent. He adds one more breaking ball. His repertoire is Paul Skeens. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying he's Skeens. I'm not saying he's going to be Skeens. What I'm saying is you have a giant right-hander that throws 101 with a wipeout slider and another breaking ball. That is what Paul Skeens' repertoire is. So, yeah, I mean, that's a high end for Chase Shores. Now, the problem for Shores is scouts. This is an air quotes problem. This is a first world problem for Chase Shores. So don't misunderstand me, okay? There's really 3 options for Chase Shores. The floor, like the worst case scenario for Chase Shores, is he becomes a big league setup man. And there are far worse things to be in the world than a big league, a 7th or 8th inning guy in Major League Baseball. But that, with his stuff, that's what he would be. Middle scenario for Chase Shores is he becomes a closer. He becomes the 9th inning closer, what we saw him do in Omaha for LSU in Major League Baseball, and he's got the stuff to do it. And that's the difference between being a 12 to 15 million guy or a $20 million per year guy. But the ceiling for Chase Shores is a frontline start, is a number one. Chase Shores, because of his ability, would never be a down-the-line starter. He's not going to be somebody's 4 or 5. He either figures it out as a starter and is a frontline ace making $30 million a year plus, or he never figures out how to be a starter and becomes a really valuable bullpen piece like Aroldis Chapman, for example. A tall, long, power arm righty who comes out of the bullpen and throwing 100 plus and is just finishing games. Like, That's the other option for Chase Shores. So there's no bad option. But with a team not having the assurance that Shores can be a starter like they have with Kade Anderson, you're not going to see him go early in round 1. Chase Shores is likely a round 2 guy. Competitive balance, round 2, probably in the same area code as Anthony Eyanson. $2.5 million is likely what Shores is going to get. But Shores has another option. Because he had the Tommy John and missed a year, he has that redshirt year available. He could return to LSU, maintain his leverage, become a starter for LSU next year. And if he becomes a starter and a dominant one, now you're talking about a guy who in the 2026 draft is a top half of round 1 guy. Now he's a $9 to $11 million pitcher there at the top of round 1, like Kade Anderson's about to be. So if you're Chase Shores, you ask yourself this question. Already had Tommy John. I've been on 2 national championship teams. Do I just take the bird in hand, the $2.5 million, and go start my pro career? Which, by the way, if he goes to a contender, he'll be fast-tracked into a bullpen scenario for a team almost immediately, if they're a contender. And then in the next offseason, he'd work on being a starter. Or let's come back to LSU, take a little NIL rev share money, try to be a starter. And if it works, now he's made himself an extra $7, $8, $9 million. That's the decision he's got to make. And that's not an easy decision because the competitor and all these guys is screaming, go back to school, be a starter, play at LSU again, be a frontline, be Kade Anderson. And now your $2 million becomes $11 million. Okay, like that's an appealing option for a guy like Chase Shores. But $2.5 million bird in hand when you've already had Tommy John is really appealing as well. Again, I think Chase Shores is going to sign a pro contract. I think he's going to get a couple $1 million and he's going to sign. But he's got an interesting decision to make. And it's similar with someone like Ethan Frey as we move to the position players. Look, Ethan Frey, Chris Stanfield, Tanner Reeves, those are the guys that are going to be interesting. Reeves, as I'm told, they are expecting him to be back, to go undrafted, to be back and be the starting second baseman. That is internally at LSU, they are expecting Tanner Reeves to return to LSU for 2026 and be the starting second baseman. And I believe that's what's going to happen. Chris Stanfield, the expectation is he gets drafted and signed. Remember, Derek Curiel is moving to center field next year. Jake Brown is back. He's going to be in right field. And if Ethan Frey returns, Ethan Frey's got to show, if he returns, he's got to show he can play a position, which is why he'd be in left field. What do you do with Chris Stanfield? Now you have a very cumbersome situation, just like you did this year with Michael Braswell. Remember, rewind the clock. Michael Braswell last year, they thought would be 1 year at LSU. He'd get drafted. That's why they went and brought in Tanner Reeves, Daniel Dickinson. They knew Milam was moving to short. So Milam moves to short. Reeves was supposed to play third. Dickinson was going to play second. Well, what happened? Braswell goes undrafted. He's back at LSU. Reeves is out of a position. And it was uncomfortable for that situation. Well, the same thing could happen in the outfield. Just like Milam was moving to short, Curiel's moving to center next year. So is Stanfield back in left, or is Reeves back? Or is Frey back playing in left field? That's the big question. So if you're Ethan Frey, similar to Bear Jones, when all you've been is a right-handed DH, you haven't shown any pro scouts that you can play a position. I mean, they haven't seen your glove. So what does that mean? He came to LSU as a catcher. We've seen him a little bit in the outfield, a little bit at first base, but at 6'6" and as athletic as he is, big power hitting bat from the right side, Ethan Frey would play in left field. If you want to hide a defender, you put him in left. Think of it this way. Think of some of the big bats at the major league level who were not great defenders, but you had to stick them somewhere, so they played left field. Manny Ramirez with the Boston Red Sox was not a good defender. Great hitter, played left field. Former LSU Tiger, Albert, don't call me Joey Bell. Slugger, 50-homer guy, played left field during his big league career. That's what Ethan Frey would project as, but he's got to show big league teams he can play in left field to warrant being drafted higher. Until that happens, he's a guy that just doesn't have a super high draftable ceiling. Would someone take a middle round flyer on him? Would he be a 4th, 5th round guy, kind of like Bear Jones? Yeah, he would be. But if you're Ethan Frey, and I'm told he does have a very healthy NIL rev share number to return next season, which I believe would be the highest on the team. Do you take that money, come back another year, play in left field, and then try to show you can hit for average, for power, and play a position? Now all of a sudden maybe you're talking about a couple $1 million in your signing bonus and you get another year at LSU. That's the decision that Ethan Frey has to make. And I do believe Ethan Frey will return to LSU for 2026. Now, the MLB draft is screwy. We talk about it every year. There is no other draft that is like this, because in both the NFL and the NBA, once you've declared and the deadline passes, regardless of where you're taken, you've forfeited your eligibility. In baseball, it's different. You can hear your name called and you can still return to school. So we can have a best guess, but you don't know what a team is going to do until that draft happens and these players' names are called. And I've gone through so many examples over the years. I mean, guys who most certainly you thought were going to be LSU Tigers. Miguel Cairo's son a few years ago. I remember having this conversation with Nolan Kane, how many hours he put into recruiting Miguel Cairo's son, Christian Cairo. And he was on campus literally standing in line. Christian Cairo was, to register for classes. When his agent called him, he got the call that he was picked, took his number, and he left, and he was gone. Zach Lee, years ago, was going through football practice, fall camp. He had been drafted by the Dodgers. All of a sudden, Frank McCourt offers him $6 million. Boom, and he is gone, never to be seen again. So you never know what a team might do in a desperate moment during negotiations in a draft, and when agents are trying to get the best dollar amount for their client. That's all going to be seen over these next few days here on Sunday, Monday with the draft, and then obviously that process through the negotiation leading up to that deadline to sign or to return to LSU. But Jay Johnson has his team in a pretty good standing. So what I'd like to do is tell you what I would project today would be LSU's starting roster for 2026, how I believe it is today, what it will look like in 2026. We'll do that as we wrap up next here on Locked On LSU, your team every day. Okay, here's what I think LSU is going to look like in 2026. Some of these are obvious. Some of these are obviously going to depend on what happens in the draft. Now, Luis Hernandez is gone, which means Kade Anderson is going to be your starting catcher behind home plate. The first base DH role is something that's going to be a little bit up in the air. So let me skip over that and come back to it. I already told you with second base, I believe Tanner Reeves is going to go undrafted and will return to LSU and be the everyday second baseman, replacing Daniel Dickinson right there. We know that at third base, they signed Braden Simpson from High Point, who hit 22 homers a year ago at High Point, hit over 300. That's a guy they are thinking will plug in and be your day one, your everyday starter at third base and be another power bat in the lineup. At shortstop, of course, we know that's going to be Stephen Milam. And then the outfield from left to right, I do believe Ethan Frey will return and be your starting left fielder. Derek Curiel is back as your center fielder. And then Jake Brown will be back and will be your everyday right fielder, which leaves a situation there with first base DH where I think you have a few options here, okay? One of them is Seth Dardar. So Seth Dardar, you might remember, is a kid from the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain. Just most recently, he went to Columbia, most recently played at Kansas State. He's a potential double-digit homer guy. He is your first base, DH, potentially. He's played all of the infield, second base, third base. He told us here on this show his most comfortable position is second base, but I already told you that Tanner Reeves is going to be the everyday second baseman. So the question is, does Dardar play first base or is he a right-handed DH? He told us point blank he just wants to hit. Okay, maybe he's your right-handed DH. So you've got Dardar. You've got Eddie Yaman. Remember, he was the Dayton transfer. It was a nice power bat for Dayton a year ago. Transferred to LSU this year and redshirted. He's a first base, third base catcher. Now, I think he's going to be a potential number 2 or 3 catcher at LSU, maybe an emergency catcher, but more likely your tall, big bat who stands on first base, catches the ball, and slugs homers, or a DH in 2026. And the other name that's a bit of a wild card is one we talked about on the show last week. If you're an everydayer, shout out because you'll remember this. We talked about Omar Cerna. Omar Cerna is either the first or second highest rated catcher for this upcoming class. And Omar Cerna already announced he is not going to sign. He is taking his name out of the MLB draft. He will be an LSU Tiger. Well, Omar Cerna, think Ethan Frey, think Jared Jones, think right-handed power bat. And if it translates immediately, I think the worst case scenario for Cerna is he's a right-handed DH, or excuse me, a right-handed pinch hitter. He takes the bat, the ABs from the right side that John Pearson did in 2025. When you need a power bat from the right side, Omar Cerna is likely that guy. The high end for Cerna in 2026 is he becomes your starting first baseman or designated hitter. So you've got three options for two spots. You've got Dardar, Yaman, and Cerna. One of those guys, I believe, is going to be your first baseman. One of those guys, I believe, is going to be your DH. One of those guys is going to be your right-handed pinch hitter. Cerna likely is also your backup catcher behind Aaron Beatty, who might do what Aaron Beatty did this year, which is catch midweeks and then occasionally on the weekend when it makes sense. So that's how I think it plays out. The thing we still have to discuss are the high school signings. And that's coming up in an episode, so make sure you're ready for that. So if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, how about you go check out The Portal? You can find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Please let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you right here for Locked on every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.